Let's go, baby. This is another episode of the Athletes and Assets podcast. I'm your host, Noah Lack, and I bring on your favorite athletes to chat about the business they're building. But today we have a very, very special guest. We have a former attorney, award-winning filmmaker, best-selling author, Crystal McCrary, who's now the co-founder, alongside her son, Orlando Magic point guard Cole Anthony, building the Amazon for youth sports. Crystal, such a pleasure to have you in studio here in New York. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here to talk about GameUp.
Yeah, it's I love this. This really resonates with me. But Crystal, let's skip the small talk. When you were younger, when Cole was younger, right? Was there ever a point in y'all's lives where you could beat him one-on-one and you still hold it to him today?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I mean, there were, of course, times I was taller than him. I could dunk on him on the kid basket. But by the time, he was up to my shoulder, it was done. I mean, he just was like, it was pure brute strength and will to win that just overtook any, skill I may or may not have had, which more likely I did not have.
Hey, I have to ask that question because when I think about family, my uncle beat me in one-on-one when I was really little and just didn't know how to play, and he won't play me ever again because he knows what's going to happen next. And so I had to make sure, was there a dynamic there like that where you hang it up, you can't show anymore that what you have?
But I never really had that skill set. I was definitely never really much of a offensive athlete. I mean, I could play defense. I was really good at defense.
Yeah.
And I ran track, played a little volleyball, a little tennis, but basketball was just never really my thing.
Yeah. And it's ironic now that you're at the intersection of basketball and tech, which we'll definitely dive into. What I really appreciate about this, Crystal, is the story of GameUp is, I resonate a lot with Cole's story because, as you mentioned in previous shows and interviews, that Cole didn't grow up starting off playing at the highest level of AAU, right? You have an incredible perspective where you guys have been at almost every level within the youth basketball system. Can you talk about that progression and what you saw along the way?
Sure. I think that Cole's experience, notwithstanding the fact that he plays professional basketball now, I think that his experience being introduced to basketball as a player is more reflective of most kids in the United States, which is He started playing New York City kid here in Manhattan, where he was playing with kids who'd never picked up a ball before. And he was similar to that himself, very beginner level teams that he was not the best on his team for a number of years. It really wasn't until probably sixth grade when he actually began starting on the teams that he was playing on. And he went through every level of playing before, or every type of team before he got to, the attrition, which I think happens for most players. But it wasn't like he was a super tall kid who, stood out in fourth and fifth grade. I mean, I have an 11-year-old that plays now too. When you see those kids that are really tall in third, fourth, fifth grade, and you just think, oh, wow, this is an incredibly tall player that will excel. But Cole wasn't that player at a young age. I mean, he always had this extreme competitiveness, but it wasn't like we knew that he was destined to go pro. I think about, I'm talking about Cole, but I think about the player Russell Westbrook.
Okay.
And I bring him up because Russell was in my documentary that I directed called Little Ballers. And I will never forget in interviewing him, and this actually made the cut of the film, but Russell was saying how he didn't really play much AAU ball coming up, and that even during his amateur years of playing like just grassroots basketball, he says, I was never the best player on my team.
Right.
But I always thought that I could be. Mm-hmm. And I think that is emblematic of that drive, that dream that so many kids have played, no matter what sport it is, that drives the whole youth sports industry in America.
Right. From an entrepreneurship perspective, you guys have such a nice founder market fit or co-founder market fit, being a parent of the system and then Cole going through it. Can you describe what is GameUp to the average consumer?
Sure. Well, I'm glad you brought up the founder fit because I think that the whole genesis of GameUp came from me being a youth sports parent. I was that parent that other parents would call or text or DM saying, Crystal, can you make a recommendation for a team for my kid? A trainer, but I'll tell you, just recommendations around the whole youth basketball ecosystem. And I was doing this for years. I mean, there were, at least 10 years that I was fielding phone calls, emails, texts, trying to make recommendations to parents based on my experience. Because it's not just Cole that, played. My daughter, who's 22 years old, she's at Harvard now. She played basketball all throughout high school, won a state championship. I'm currently in the midst of it now with my 11-year-old that plays for a storied AAU team here in New York City called Riverside Hawks, the same team Donovan Mitchell played for, Meta World Peace played for them, many other great players. So I've seen it, and I continue to see it, and I've continued to see the evolution of it.
Yeah.
And the birth of GameUp, notwithstanding all these calls that I was taking and advice I was giving, the youth sports space has become more and more fragmented. And that is what has, gave rise to GameUp, to try to find the right program, the right team, the right trainer. That information is not in one place.
Right.
And that's really what caused GameUp to be born, to help parents, which I initially thought was parents, which we'll get into in a moment, but help parents find the right fit for their kid, but in one place.
Absolutely. And so we're talking about an app that's being developed, correct?
Yes.
Right? And for me, I think of it as like a marketplace, right? You have on one side, you have all the trainers, the AAU programs, the people that need the kids. And then on the other side is, you mentioned maybe not parents anymore, but either the kid or the parent has an account and is leveraging that account to find the best opportunities in multiple things on the marketplace, training, coaches or teams, right? Is that how right way to think about it?
That's exactly right. And when we first launched the web app, we launched it in the tri-state area, which it's still there. And it's still in beta, although we are live.
Okay.
We have a consultancy service as well. And what we discovered is the people making the appointments with the basketball consultant, our assumption was that it was going to be parents. But what we discovered is about 40% of the consultant calls that we receive are actually from the athletes themselves. The youngest kids making appointments have been 12 years old.
Calling you? Hey, Crystal, where's the program?
Calling.
Why can't Riverside Hawks, why don't they have an extra roster spot? What's going on?
Right. Yeah, there's calls like that. It's so interesting the types of calls you get. There's kids that call and say, well, I'm currently on this youth basketball team, but I feel like I'm now the best player on the team and I need more competition. So what team would you recommend that I, explore? So kids will call and say that.
If someone asked me that, I said, first of all, let me see your jump shot. Let me see the tape. Roll the tape.
Well, therein you see one of the issues you get, because you do have, how do I put this? You do have some delusion with the kids, but actually there's more delusion, I think, with parents, right? Because parents will call and they will say, my kid is the best kid on this team. And we're like, okay, really? Well, where's the team? They're like, oh, okay. Oh, it's in Westchester? All right. And who are the teams your son's team is playing against? Oh, they're playing against XYZ. And it's like, oh, okay. And your kid gets, you say, 40 points a game? Yeah, and I'm ready for my kid to go on to another team.
PSA Cardinals. He's ready for the EYBL.
Exactly.
Crystal, can you get us on the team? Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Right. And you're like, ooh, it's levels to this.
Okay.
Right? It's levels to this.
Yep.
So sometimes, you're given a reality check. Sometimes you're like, well, maybe you're not quite ready to go to the top EYBL team, but maybe we have something in between. Maybe you should be looking at the Riverside Hawks high school team.
Okay.
Or another team that's not quite that level. But it's this entire ecosystem that athletes, parents just don't understand. Think of it like this. Consultants for schools, for colleges, to help families figure out, how do I navigate this system? How do I get my kid on a team? Their tryouts, during like sort of the tryout season, and it varies from city to city, from program to program. But you got 100 kids, 200 kids coming to a tryout for really 2-3 roster spots, because many of those teams already have their teams. How do I figure out where my kid fits? That's one of the questions that comes up as well in the consultancy portion of the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. On that light, what do you think is the biggest problem in youth sports outside of it being fragmented? Is it the emergence of NIL? Is it delusional parents? Is it coaches who just want kids paying a lot of money to join their program? When you put everything together, right, there's so many moving pieces to youth sports and why it has issues. From your experience building GameUp, what's been like the biggest pain point you've seen, or the biggest problem?
Well, the pain point that we looked to solve for in creating GameUp is that initial helping parents, and what we've discovered, helping parents and athletes find a team to try out for, or it's the discovery portion of it. It's the discovery part of it, right?
Is that was the first pain point. Is it discovery?
It was first, it's discovery, right?
Okay.
Because many of these parents, let me add this in. GameUp at this stage, at this nascent stage, is an app is a platform for people who are newer to basketball.
Sure.
That are not that top 1%.
No, this isn't for your ESPN Top 100. It's for guys like me who wanted to play competitively.
No, you played college basketball, but you could have, yes, your family could have used GameUp possibly.
I definitely could have used this because for me personally, I never played on a shoe circuit team.
Really?
And I wanted to, but also it's tough because I think a lot of kids, whether they want to play in college or not, want to be as competitive as possible, but also want to play. And so, if you want to play on the best team, but you don't play, then what's the point?
Right.
And then the other end of the spectrum is you don't want to play on a very bad team and you're scoring all the points.
Right.
This.
Well, that's the
problem,
psychology of it.
Yeah,
and that's actually a great question. I mean, that is a conversation that I, along with other consultants, have had with a number of parents that, we call it for, youth sports, age-old question. Do I put my kid on a team where they're the woman or they're the man and they're playing the entire time, but their team's losing every game? Or do I put my kid on a team where they're not going to really play, but the team's winning all the time? And, what we've discovered is neither one of those scenarios are really the best answer. You want a happy medium, but more often than not, you don't necessarily get that happy medium for, the large group of people that are calling. And so what I do say for the parent who has their kid, and we see this a lot more too, kids playing on 2-3 teams in youth basketball.
Yeah.
So that kid who is perhaps riding the bench, the 11th, 12th player on the team, on a really great team, their parents will have another team where they're the best player, and they can get both. They can because it is important. One of the things we say is, did you used to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, because you want to what I say to my 11-year-old who's so far off from being even high school basketball is, we don't care if you win or lose, if your team wins or lose. We really do just want you to have fun, play your hardest, and continue to build the fundamentals of the game.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's some parents like, oh, no, it's about winning. But we really, having been through this now with our third kid and seeing a lot of parents having gone through this, it's really about, is your kid enjoying themselves and are they getting better?
Yeah.
So that is something that we're seeing. But a lot of families are having their kids play for 2 teams so they can build the confidence and get the real game time experience. And then you have the kids who are, again, the starters on their team. But once again, that's a very small percentage of the overall pool of kids that want to play. And we find that each family, each child has a different goal.
Yeah.
For why they're playing the game. There are truly some kids, and I'm sure you've seen this too, that they're like, I just actually want to be able to make my 7th grade JV team, and when I get into the game, I want to be able to, dribble the ball and not embarrass myself.
Sure. Yeah.
There's that. And what we really try to focus on too is there are a whole host of other positives of kids playing team sports that you get out of that. I mean, working through adversity, teamwork.
Life lessons.
Life lessons. That's
translatable
exactly right.
to every other part of life, business, relationships.
That's exactly right.
No, that's great. And on a macro level, why I'm really excited about this is because, one, I think basketball is becoming even more popular in America.
Globally.
And globally. But when we think about your app, like players like Cole are becoming global icons. And their influence is extending to kids at the young age during this TikTok era. They see them everywhere. They want to be like them. And so I'm really excited about you starting with basketball.
Yes.
I'm also excited about you starting in the tri-state area, because I think, when you think about the tech and, onboarding different people, what better place to do that than in your backyard?
That's right.
And when you have New York, New Jersey,
Connecticut. Yes.
I love that you're starting in this region. It makes total sense. When we think about it from a tech perspective, right? When I think about a marketplace, building marketplaces from a tech startup, it's like this chicken and egg dichotomy. It's like, okay, well, are any parents going to sign up for the app if there's no teams available? And why would teams sign up for the app if there's no supply of kids and coaches? How have you addressed this sort of chicken and egg marketplace thing? Do you go to programs first and say, hey, I promise you on board to this app, we have kids coming, they're going to want to choose you? How do you think about that in building this?
That's a great question. And what we found is that there's more players than there are teams.
Yes. Okay. Yep. Makes sense.
And the reaction to that, which is also occurring, is more teams are cropping up, as I'm sure you've seen.
What do you mean by that?
There are more teams that are being formed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there are more nascent teams, there are programs. I mean, they're like just in the New York City area, for example. One of the teams that Cole played with at, 7 or 8 years old is a program called Fast Break Sports.
Okay.
And Fast Breaks was one of those, sort of like private school kid-esque programs because it was a program you paid to play in. And it's continued to grow. And what I like about what Fast Breaks has done is it was turned into or joined forces with something called BSNY. Basketball Sports New York.
Okay.
They have several teams. And then those are boys teams. And then they started Hustle, which is 18 different girls teams. And they've just continued to expand to serve this market. And what they're addressing is the demand for kids wanting to play on teams when most of these kids weren't going to make, we're talking New York, the Gauchos, or Riverside, or New Heights, or Long Island Lightning. I mean, and of course, PSA, that EYBL team, they do have middle school teams now. Most kids are not going to make those teams. So what we've seen is there are more kids that are looking for teams than there are teams in existence.
Okay.
And then, so what I discovered when we first launched GameUp last year, we actually did a youth basketball fair. And so I invited basketball programs from around the tri-state area to, set up shop and share with parents information about their teams. And what we discovered is there are several new teams that are emerging to meet this demand.
Okay.
Some less well known, but around like in Queens and in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, that are, just may have one team that is that AAU team. I'll tell you, and I have to get the most recent data, but when we did Little Ballers, that was in 2012. But at that time, there were 700 AAU teams registered in the tri-state area. Mm-hmm. Right? So that has, of course, grown. Some of those could be registered and, not be active. But it's an industry, it's a sport that, yes, continues to grow across the youth sports space, across the country, and across the globe.
Yeah.
And that's part of what we're speaking to. We're speaking to this parent pool that spends according to the Aspen Institute study in 2022, parents in the United States spend $40 billion a year on youth sports.
Incredible.
Right. That's not just
incredible.
Basketball, obviously, but the basketball share is quite significant within that number. And it just continues to grow because part of it is youth basketball has gotten younger and younger, which I'm sure you've seen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so clearly these programs are like, oh, we need a bigger boat.
Exactly.
we need a bigger boat. Here's one thing about this I do not envy you on, though. When we talk about tech in basketball, in a sport that has, in some ways, a lot of old school traditions and way of doing things from the business side, I don't envy you going to some of these gyms and talking to some of these trainers who still operate like they have flip phones or something, trying to get them on an app. I know that hasn't been easy. I know that has not been easy.
Well, it's interesting because most of these programs, the way the parents communicate. I know I won't name the app, but you're well aware of an app out there that a lot of parents use to communicate, or at least it's presented to communicate, practice times and, game schedules.
Is that Teamworks?
I'm not going to say the name.
Teamworks is trash. I can say that because I had it in college.
I'm not going to say the name. But what I'm discovering is, notwithstanding the existence of these, what I'm hearing from parents is they still have group texts within their teams. It's still very much like a family way of communicating.
Yeah.
It's a village.
Sure.
The way they communicate. But
which is great, but sometimes it's not. It's ain't family environment sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes.
Well, and they fight on these group texts too sometimes, but it's like happy birthday.
Sally, who I've never met. Like, you get my ride to practice.
You were supposed to bring the drinks for this game.
Drama in the group chat. We can't be having
drama.
that.
Right.
We got to productize that. Come on now.
But the pain point that we're answering to is to make it as simple as possible for the parents, for the trainers to come on there and look at it as a platform that, remember Angie's List? That might be a little bit before your day.
I'm not an Angie List guy. I'm an Angel List guy. I know what Angel List is, but I'm not an Angie's List.
Angie's List was like, look at it. It basically is a information platform, a discovery platform to come on there and punch in. For Angie's List, it was whatever, consumer service or whatever you're looking for. But in the case of GameUp, in the sports space, again, we're just in basketball now, but we're expanding across the country in Q2 2025. We're going to expand to other sports beyond basketball.
Oh, you knew the go-to-market question was coming. Yes. Bring it on.
So we're going to expand, and as we aggregate all of this content, it is, again, user-friendly, not that complicated, convoluted. We have a very simple UI experience where you come in. I mean, the way it currently works, you come in, you put the kid's age, zip code, gender. These are the teams and programs we found for you. Comes right up like that.
And that's being done with the AI that you're building.
And
is his name still named Terry? Is that what the name is?
Yes, the name is still Terry. I'm impressed. You did your research.
Hey, come on. We try to do a little bit of that here on Athletes and Athletes. We got to come prepared when we have guests like yourself. But
that's right. And Terry is a generative AI, and Terry can give all of that same information as well, except in real language. And the database continues to grow and grow and grow with all of this information. And so even though we've launched in the tri-state area, we're beginning to bleed beyond the tri-state area into the DMV area, into Philadelphia and different parts of Pennsylvania, and up into Massachusetts. And I think I mentioned Connecticut, but we're continuing to grow. And that's happening by, we call it good old-fashioned FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yep.
Teams, new teams, uploading their team information onto GameUp because they want to be discoverable, because it becomes a business proposition for them to be discoverable to parents looking for teams whose kids aren't making these more competitive teams.
Absolutely.
Or just want to discover a team that's actually in their area, that's in their zip code. So it's kind of working hand in hand in that way.
I love that. I think for my opinion, for this to really take off, it's a trust thing. And there's like two things here that I see making that successful. One is this aggregation of data, aggregation of all of these teams, making sure you have just an encyclopedia of all the youth teams from EYBL to, the private school teams where kids have a ride to practice.
Right. That's right. Or a driver.
or a driver. Maybe in New York you have a driver. I wouldn't know, but like that sounds pretty cool to me.
Well, I grew up in Detroit. We didn't have driver. It's like, driver what?
No.
The bus?
Yeah. 8 Mile. Yeah.
Right.
No.
Yes, exactly.
And then number two is something that I've heard you allude to, which was this anonymous rating of experiences between the parent and the program. Did it go well after I reached out and we did this whole process? And it feels like that review system could be very important. So these two things for me, I feel like, could really lead to success if it goes correctly. And when I think about aggregation of data, that may take a lot of time, which leads me into my next thing is like, have you bootstrapped this? Are you guys backed by investors? Like, how have you structured this company? It's an LLC, right? So yeah. I assume you haven't taken that much investment. Right. Like, how does it work economically?
So this has all been seeded internally by essentially call it our family office.
Okay.
Mine, Cole's,
Amazing.
My husband's. I mean, we have seeded this ourselves. But I am glad that you asked that because we are getting ready to do our first round of fundraising within the next. We will do that in 2024.
Wow. Okay.
Q4 2024. Q4, but it's a seed round.
Seed round.
Yeah,
wow. Okay.
We'll do like a real seed round. Not like. Essentially what we did before. It was, I can't even say family and friends because we didn't go to friends. It was just family.
Yeah.
So we are, so I have an incredible, the team that we have, I have an incredible COO. I have a great chief product officer, a fractional chief product officer.
Okay.
We have a fractional CFO. We have a marketing team that runs our social media. I mean, still very, startup.
Yeah,
but
internal. Like you've really built this from the ground up within your family, and
that's right.
And I'm assuming this round, the seed round.
Yes.
We talked about the data, right? And you're going to need probably more technical people on the team, and the use of proceeds.
Yeah, and I do have a fractional CTO. So yes, we'll need more technical. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. The round is probably going towards a lot of the technical help you may need, and also maybe more go-to-market strategy. What are those use of proceeds for?
Exactly. Yeah. So we will have a go-to-market strategy. We will get a full-time CTO because we don't have that, a full-time UX UI, and we are currently a web app. And
right.
we will use that also to
you need to be in the App Store.
Right, exactly. Right. And then to expand across the U.S. So it'll expand in some key basketball cities, and that'll be the primary use of funds.
That's awesome. Where do you see GameUp going in the next 5 years? 5 years from now, where is GameUp?
So my vision has always been that GameUp truly will be the Amazon of youth sports, starting from that key pain point of parents who are just trying to find the right team, the right program for their kids, and then what are the logical and natural expansions of everything that serves the youth sports ecosystem. So that is trainers, that is the kids' mixtapes, that is
everyone needs a mixtape, Crystal. If you don't have a mixtape, right. Are you even a basketball player?
Exactly. The orthopedic surgeons or sports therapists, or really every aspect that serves the youth sports ecosystem. So think about if you think about Waze, or you think about other apps that directionally take you across the country, really across the globe, will think of being able to come to GameUp and there to be one-stop shopping that can guide you around the entire youth basketball system with really user-friendly prompts that will answer every question that you have in this space, help to find the right team, the right program, and anything that can help complete your youth athlete.
Absolutely. Last question, and then we'll wrap up. What has been the biggest lesson you've learned about entrepreneurship building GameUp so far? And my second part is, what do you think Cole has learned about entrepreneurship working together alongside yourself?
Well, although I'm a former entertainment lawyer, I practiced law for a very short period of time, and then pretty much after a year and a half or so of practicing law, went into writing books, creating TV shows, series, movies, etc. So I very much am the creative type.
Sure.
And so I would say the biggest lesson I learned from creating GameUp is, instead of going to law school, or perhaps not instead of, I wish I'd gotten my MBA also. Because I have gotten a crash course in the best possible way of really getting into the weeds of doing a business plan. I mean, learning new terminology, it's like, oh, well, what's your CAC? It's like
your CAC, your churn, your retention.
What is that? I mean, I know what ROI is, but CAC, it's like, oh, Crystal, customer acquisition cost. It's like, oh, yeah. I mean, but like really learning how to create the actual business plan that is the engine of an idea. Mm-hmm. And so for that, I've deeply enjoyed that. I'm continuing to enjoy that, but really getting into how the numbers and the data support the idea.
I love that. and for Cole, what do you think Cole has learned?
I think Cole has learned that as well. So while he may not be the creative type, but his superpower has been his athleticism and his ability to play basketball. Mm-hmm. And I think this has been an incredible crash course for Cole as well, to really learn from the inside out, the building of a company and the various layers that go on top of that to make a successful business plan and to become, I love this Mark Cuban quote, not to just become a launtrepreneur, but to become an entrepreneur.
I love that. That's great. I could see you on Shark Tank saying that.
Yes. Makes it, from your lips flows to Mark's ears.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I liken sports to entrepreneurship. They're so similar. I think, obviously you talked about layers in building the company.
Yes.
It takes layers in the process of becoming an NBA player like your son. So we really appreciate you coming on and sharing a bit about GameUp. This has been another great episode of the Athletes and Assets podcast. I'm your host, Noah Lack, with Crystal McCrary, co-founder of GameUp, with her son and Orlando Magic point guard Cole Anthony. Crystal, thanks for stopping by and chatting a little about your journey in GameUp.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the amplification of GameUp. And it's, GameUp.FYI.
GameUp.FYI. All right. Make sure you check it out, and we'll plug it in the show notes and on social and all that. So, all right.